Hello there, people of the internet. My name is Udwuri Jagero, and this is Dialogues with Jagero. We are with Mildren Awino, and we are continuing with our beautiful series. Awino, it's very interesting that we are going to be talking about water and what it means to us as people of the earth. Yeah. Water is essential for the body, constituting a significant portion of its composition. So they say that water, our bodies is 60% water. But then the most interesting thing is when you go down to the organs. Yeah. You find that the brain and the heart alone has 73% of water. The lungs is just water, 83%. Yeah. Muscles and kidneys, 79% water. Right. Skin, of all things, is 64% water. Bones, they seem dry, but bones are about 31% water. And then blood is obviously 90% water.
Water, yeah.
So it's interesting. There is a research you were doing before.
Absolutely, yes.
You want to tell me about that research?
I was researching the phenomenon that is the mermaids, especially in Zimbabwe. It came to my attention that much as Zimbabwe is a landlocked nation, the lore or the mythology of mermaids, even the sightings or experiences with the mermaids, with the locals, is even more than you would even attribute to a nation that has like an ocean or a larger water body. But again, Zimbabwe has the whole plateau with the rivers, Limpopo and Zambezi, but we'll get to that. What I wanted to first of all introduce to the viewers is that naturally we are water beings, right? We have already seen that majority of the elements in our body is water. But also what I noticed to be very interesting is that externally, cultures that live near water bodies will always have some kind of mythology, some kind of belief, some kind of spiritual system that includes water spirits. Now, this is because for the ancients, they believed in themselves as custodians. They're simply custodians of the land. They are not owners of the land. They believe that the land, the waters especially, has its owners and it has its guardians. So it was important for the ancients to live in harmony with these spirits, nature spirits, earth spirits, which is why our brand of spirituality is eco spirituality, as I put it, because it involved preserving the environment and having respect for the environment. Now, either way, with these entities, because of the nature of water really pervades every material space. So it is gendered as feminine. So you will see many water spirits being mermaids or being water goddesses, although, yes, there are other cultures that have male water spirits. If we look at West Africa, the pantheon of the Yoruba, they have a very interesting, layered. It's not just one level of water spirits. There's the water spirit that is found under the ocean, on the ocean floor. The very deep sea deity known as Olokun. And Olokun, there are some, depending on who you ask, others will tell you, oh, it's male, others will tell you, oh, it's feminine. But it's neither here nor there. It could be either. But then from the deep sea, you have the ocean where the sun can penetrate, the upper level of the ocean. And that would fall under Yemaya, right? And I know many viewers would know Yemaya over Olokun, because Olokun is nobody goes to the bottom of the ocean anyway, other than a shaman. So that would be Yemaya. And then you have the Orisha of the rivers and the lakes, who would be Oshun. And I have an interesting experience in 2020. By the way, I had so many spiritual experiences in 2020. There was one of the people who follow me on my Facebook page is an adherent or a daughter of Olokun. They are based in the States, so they messaged me. It was a very interesting message, and they told me, "Oh wow, I've been actually sent to you by my deity, who is Oshun." And she gave me a message from her, but also a gift. So she told me, my deity, who's Oshun, has sent me to give you this gift and to give you this message. And it was a very uplifting message, because I was just at the beginning of my becoming a diviner, becoming a spiritualist and a practitioner. So it was very encouraging. But again, you'd sit down and think, yes, the Yoruba religion is a closed religion.
What was the message?
Religion. Oh, the message was, well, to
just a little bit.
Yeah, just
an overview of it.
Yeah,
yes.
just an overview. It was. She said essentially, at the beginning of my journey, I'm doing very well, and I will go very far. And the lives I will touch and impact will not just be from my culture. It's going to be expansive around the globe, which makes sense because she's not even a deity from my culture. Although I have to add that I'm a River Lake Nilot anyway. So Oshun is a goddess of rivers and lakes. So it makes sense from an elemental perspective. We also on our side have our own deities of the lake. And usually deities of the water are associated with wealth. They are associated with health as well, so healing. I know you've had the Luo, our oral literature, the story of Nyamgondo.
Yes, Nyamgondo Magudumbari.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He found an old woman in his fishing net after praying for fish. And took her home, and apparently she became his wife, and he became very wealthy. Then one day he decided, obviously he forgot where his wealth came from, and he offended the lady.
How did Nyamgondo, by the way, offend the lady? Was it because did he marry a second wife?
No, he didn't. From what I know, he had gone for perambulating and came back home very drunk, and he antagonized the woman or antagonized the lady. So the lady said, okay, if you think I'm useless, then let me go back with everything. So
did she actually say, let me go back with everything? How much she just say, let me go back?
Yeah, she did not say it. According to the tale, she just thought to herself that, oh, wow, this man does not appreciate the effort or the wealth that I've brought to him, which is why he's talking to me like this, because I believe he insulted her or something in the heat of being inebriated. So he went to bed, and when he woke up, everything was gone, because she woke up very early in the morning and headed back to the lake where she came from. And all the livestock, all those things that she came with followed her right into the lake. And Nyamgondo woke up and found himself a pauper again, back to square one. And one of the lessons that we learn from this, and I usually tell people, is that this is actually evidence of the fact that as a people in our culture, the Luo culture, we did believe in marine spirits. And we did believe that marine spirits bring us wealth, right? Or they bring a certain kind of abundance. Also associated with them, like I said, is health, where the thing is, if I'm to bring you back to the beginning, even in Genesis, where the Spirit of the Lord was roaming above the waters. Exactly. So we're not really told where who created the waters, really. The waters were already in existence, was already in existence by the time the creation story was being told. But again, what we understand is that nobody was there in the beginning, isn't it? Nobody can tell you for a fact this is what happened. So
are you in other words trying to tell me that nature precedes God?
I believe God is also an emanation of nature, especially creator gods. If I'm to take you back...
What do you mean by creator gods?
Right. If I'm to take you back to the cosmology of African beliefs, we have the very high transcendent gods, the first cause, the overall designer, right, of the cosmos. And usually that God is not really even prayed to. If you think of the Luo high god, who is Jok, many Luos really would not imagine that they would direct their prayers to. And that's fine, because usually the nature of the thing is the transcendent God brings about all that is, or all that has potential, and they retreat. Now the creator God is the one who then gives form, or the material reality that we see. So we usually, when we are praying, usually the creator God is associated with the sun, which is why many of our gods don't have form themselves. And I believe this is also why, even in the Bible, the very fact that we are told the Spirit of the Lord...
When you say they don't have forms, it means that you can see them.
You can only experience them. You can't really it's called anthropomorphization, where you can't compare the beliefs of East African gods or what they look like. We don't know what they look like. But if you look at West Africa and you look at their pantheons, you kind of have an idea what Oshun looks like, or what colors that are associated with her. You kind of understand what Yemaya looks like, what Elegua looks like. Some of them are even accompanied by puppies, or they are carrying a stick, or they are smoking, a cigar. So many of these manifestations have human form, especially in Western Africa. But if you look at Southern and Eastern Africa, many of us have kept our gods in their purest form, which is non-human form. And I believe that still makes sense, because we humans are only one part of nature, or one aspect of nature. So it makes sense that our gods would be non-human, or would be entities that we cannot directly associate with ourselves, something higher than ourselves. So when the spirit, just by the statement that the Spirit of God is roaming over the oceans, or over the waters,
over the face of the earth.
Yes, it means that the earth was already created. There was already creation that had happened. It's just that we don't have sight of it according to the Bible. So we are only told from that point. Another interesting thing, in Egyptian belief, their gods emerged, the very early gods emerged out of the waters. And they emerged by speaking their names, by speaking for their names. And I believe that's a very interesting take, because I believe as humanity, especially as Africans, the cradle of civilization, similarly, we have emerged from the waters, because the very first creations came from the water. Earth itself is a water planet. If you look at it, really, it's 70%? Covered by water. So it should not even be called Earth. It should be called water, water planet. So the point here is like a denial of the element that is water is essentially a denial of self, because as we've just seen now, the body is composed majority of water, majorly of water, and the earth itself. So why would we not live in tandem or have some appreciation or veneration for that particular element? Another thing that usually the reason why water is associated with healing, I know you've seen traditional healers wear a lot of white when they are performing their duties. And even the divination is done with shells, right? And the shells are associated with the waters. The ancestral realm is also associated with the waters. The reason why they cover they paint their faces with white clay is because the white clay is taken from either the riverbed, the seabed, and what have you. And that kind of creates an affinity with the water element. So by the reason why I'm using the shells, I am actually calling forth the spirits of my ancestors, and I'm calling upon the water element itself to direct me, or to help me, or to aid me direct my intuition appropriately. Right. So we say that when our ancestors die, they go into the waters, not necessarily into the air. They go to the waters, because then that becomes the realm that we associate with directly. If I could also bring your attention to another point, many healers and diviners are essentially initiated in water bodies, rivers.
Like baptism.
Exactly. Exactly. In fact, I wrote a very long post a few months ago about, or just comparing the baptism of Jesus with the initiation of traditional diviners and healers. It's quite similar, because you're usually told that to be called to be a diviner is essentially, they say that you are called to the river. You've been called to the lake. You've been called to the ocean. So you have to go there so that you can take on those spirits. And if you remember the story of Jesus' baptism, I related that with the Red Sea, with Moses, and also Elijah. And if you remember, were these the two figures that appeared during the Transfiguration when Jesus was praying was it Mount Carmel?
I think so, yes.
And then I believe there were two ancestral spirits. I mean, if it's Moses or Elijah, those are ancestral spirits. And you know that these are essentially prophets or men of God who had some kind of authority or power when it came to the water. Because Elijah? He also parted a river, River Jordan. In fact, it was the same river that Jesus was baptized in. So it's very interesting how water is actually acknowledged, but indirectly in the Bible. But water is a primary element to our own.
So the transfiguration of Jesus is, it appears in the book of Matthew, chapter 17, or Mark 9.
Yeah.
The setting is, it's the confirmation of Jesus' divinity.
Right.
The transfiguration confirmed Jesus' divine nature and is unique. Moses and Elijah.
Yeah.
Yes, are the ones that appeared.
Yeah.
So you'd equate Moses and Elijah as
they were
what we'd call ancestors today.
Exactly, the ancestors, and also they are connected to the water. If you see the feats that these prophets or great men of God did, Moses parted the Red Sea, right?
Yes.
And Elijah parted River Jordan, by the way. So it's very interesting. And Jesus himself is the one who calmed the storm. He walked on water.
Yeah.
And there's certain things, when you read the New Testament, you realize that Jesus really is from a maternal order. He has allyship with the water realm as a healer himself. So a lot of subtext can be seen in the Bible where they are paying homage to that. Of course, there's the main deity who is Yahweh, but there's an understanding that there is also an association with water. But another thing I also mentioned to those to my audience is that in the Catholic Church, they associate the divinity or Mami Water, the deity that is associated with water, who is known as Mami Water, by the way, across Africa, but in different names, using different names. She's known as the Madonna of the Sea. I don't know if you've heard about
Madonna of the Sea.
Yes. Mary, Madonna of the Sea. And she's the one
she's called Mary, Madonna of the Sea.
Yes, Mary as Madonna of the Sea. So in some ways, Mary becomes that, Mary becomes Mami Water, or becomes that entity or deity that is associated with the waters in Catholicism, right? And that's where they also have a ministry or apostleship of the sea. So the sailors would have to pray to this particular Mary, whereas a fisherman in Lake Victoria will not deal with the Madonna of the Sea. For them, we have Minrech, is it Minrech? And she's the one who the fishermen give offerings to, so that they can get an abundant catch of fish.
I want to ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
There is a lot of superstition around that. That even when in Luo culture, when somebody dies in the sea, it is looked at as a sacrifice. That Pio de Corde. Pio de Corde is a very sort of very spiritual term.
Yeah.
Meaning that he has not actually died, he has just vanished.
He's been snatched.
He has been snatched and taken, and the gods of the sea, Namraj, they even talk about Yampi. So Yampi meaning the elements that can come from the sea.
Yes.
So in Gwasi or Karungu, there are diseases that are said to be only suffered by fishermen. I don't know if you know about it.
I'm aware of river sickness. So if you call it lake sickness, I'm aware of that, because the spirits or ailments that are brought about by the water. And usually it's for a reason. It's usually just a manifestation of something either that you need to do. There's something that you haven't done correctly, so you're supposed to correct it. So these are the kind of ailments that cannot be treated in a hospital. Right? It's like a spiritual illness.
It is usually there is a very there is a family next to our place that were actually fishermen from Karungu. They used to come back home with a stomach issue.
Okay.
It just used to swell. So a lot of people around were saying that what were they referring to? There is a phrase that they were using that are not tuopi.
I see. And this is why usually they have to do rituals before entering the water.
And a lot of people do not like those rituals, that they are very satanic.
I mean, it depends on what they mean by satanic, because the thing is...
I believe they are satanic because it is not Christian.
No, okay. But
as Christians, before you go into the sea,
right,
you pray to Jesus and say that, Lord Jesus, now that we are embarking our journey into this into the lake, please be with us. But then if you go the other way and talk and give a prayer to Minrech, you see, that is now
you're crossing your wires.
That is now satanic.
All right.
At least.
Well, I disagree with that. I think you can say it is not Christian. You can say it is not the Christian way, because when you say it is satanic, it means that you're saying you're calling an entire culture, role belief, to be demonic, which it is not. It's simply different from what the Christian would do. And another thing, other than Jesus, they also pray to Mary of the sea. So what's the difference between praying to Mary of the sea and somebody who prays to Minrech? Because they are still feminine entities.
Mary is the mother of Jesus. Minrech is not the mother of Jesus.
Well, Mary is associated with Minrech. She's an emanation. She's like an aspect of her. Because how can you say you have a water deity or a saint of the sea, but us on this other side who also have a saint or deity of the sea? How can us, our view be satanic, but the Christian or Catholic view be okay? So I think it's more of, they are similar, but they come from different religions. I think we can just look at it as, this is non-Christian. Yeah. And then this is the African traditional way of doing it. As long as, I usually say, well, when you start going into the borderlines of satanism, when you're making a human sacrifice, for instance, right, and that's not what they do. They usually would carry an animal, say,
and I think that is the biggest sort of junction that a lot of Christians, so to speak, find themselves,
right.
Because they are coming from a very rich ancestral practice, especially people that are living by the sea, or people living by the mountain. You know, the Kikuyus face the mount,
right?
And I do not believe that they're actually praying to the mountain.
Yes,
there is a deeper, surrender to some sort of God.
Yes.
But then a lot of people seeing you like, Gashagwa, when he faced the mountain, he was like, but we thought you're Christian and your wife is also a prayer warrior. Yeah. Why are you facing the mountain? Yeah. And I think this is where, for example, if you have a fisherman who is also going to AIC or going to SDA, and you are telling them about Minrech, and you're also telling them about if they are Catholic and there is the mother of the sea. Right. You see, right. So I think this is now the push and pull that the body or the spirit on ourselves are having. So, do you still pray to Jesus and pray to Minrech at the same time, or you must pick? There are lots of people that will say you must pick where your allegiance is.
Now, I get what you mean.
Yeah.
And I would put it like this. It is not, our nature spirits are not worshipped in the sense that the Christians would worship Yahweh, for instance. These are seen to be guardians, because we remember in our cosmology, we have the transcendent God, the most high gods, then we have the creator gods of the sun gods, then we have the ancestors as the mediators between ourselves and the gods, more like angels, and then we have the elemental spirits. Now, when we talk about water spirits, those fall under elementals, right? So what we are talking about when you talk about communing with them, it's about having reverence for nature. So when you're honoring Minrech before you enter the lake, because I understand, by the way, people who there's one of my in-laws who lives in Kisumu, in Kisumu, he told me that the lake does not like visitors. Right? And you can't just go into the lake all willy-nilly without some kind of...
That is why you find a lot of people that come visiting. You've realized that in our place, there are a lot of people that come visiting usually die in the lake, like Nyathindo Mubiru Limbe, kids like that. A woman who is newly married, they will often drown in the water. So perhaps that's
in fact, we are going to talk about this because that happens a lot, say, in a country like Zimbabwe that have very rich mythology around water spirits and mermaids. So we can talk about that as well. But I see what you mean, because it is not, when you are giving an offering to Minrech or a water deity, you're not necessarily worshipping that deity. You're simply acknowledging nature. You're giving nature its due respect. You're saying, I'm entering your territory, and I want to acknowledge that this is your territory, and I just want to get from point A to point B, or I can exist in this territory. It's like entering somebody's house, with your shoes on, and kifwayo with nothing to offer, So it's more like a courtesy, like a spiritual courtesy that we give. And we do that everywhere. When I go to any new place, I have to ensure that I make peace with the spirits of that land, because you don't know what you're doing to offend whatever sensibilities of that land. And it doesn't mean that this is a negative principality. No, it just means that I acknowledge that I don't own the land, I don't own the earth, I don't own the waters. So those that own these waters, these lands, I'm giving you your due recognition and your due respect. Allow me passage.
A negative principality.
Yes, it's not a negative
principality. Do you know what they say in the Bible? The principalities of darkness.
Right, in high places. In fact, that's very peculiar. I kept asking, why are there dark powers in high places? Whereas for us, we have the infernal realm, dark or destructive spirits. But you see,
Awino, it's very, very important that even when we walk in the dark, I feel like we walk a lot in fear of the spirits that might attack us. So I think we are going to go back into our conversation. But do you think the spirits are always out to harm humans? For example, walking in a lonely street, forget about men who want to rob you and kill you, But if you're walking in darkness or in a desert at night, what are the spirits saying about you? I mean, my thinking would be that I am immediately protected by our ancestors. I am immediately protected by the spirits. But we have often fronted spirits and spirituality as this angry, aggressive people that are out to harm humans. Is it really true?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You don't have to walk around in fear of your life every single time you go out of your house at all, because then that would become a very controlling entity, or that would become an entity that has taken over that space, because a nature entity feels no way, does not look at humans as antagonistic, or does not look at them as entirely good. They are essentially amoral, where their sensibilities are not the same as ours. So always look at it as entering somebody's domain. What would you do when you're going into somebody's house? So this would not apply to me going, out to the shop and going through the roads or what have you. Usually this entails certain spaces, especially like the waters, as we've discussed, the mountains, as we discussed the forests as well. So you always have to look at it in terms of that, not the developed places, because usually the developed places, there's also some kind of veneration they have to do before they build any structure. I don't know if you've heard about that as well. They have to actually appease the spirits of the land. And the people who are in construction will also give you those examples where they've seen them having to appease
That's very interesting.
Indeed.
That's very interesting, because why is it that in Luo culture, the firstborn will carry the axe? You remember how we got that?
Yes. And I think there's a chicken involved.
There's a chicken involved.
Yes. And it's the same concept. It's abusing the spirit of the land or venerating the spirit of the land, because essentially by putting up a structure, you're taking up space. in a space that is essentially not yours as an owner. So you're taking up space in somebody else's domain. So by giving something, you're acknowledging that this is what I'm doing. I'm giving you something in return. So it's not that the chicken in and of itself makes a difference. It is just that by you doing that or taking that action, it's like the same way you would do with a visitor. If somebody comes to your house, you'll make them a nice meal, isn't it? You'll go out of your way to give them something that they like, a delicacy. So for us, that's how we relate, and that's why we give, if it's a chicken or a goat, it's because these are the things that the ancestors themselves loved to eat when they were alive, right? And you mentioned the desert. When you're in the desert, I don't know if you're aware that they say that it is fraught with the jinn, the spirits of the jinn. So if you talk to Muslims, they'll tell you a lot about jinn. But again, we don't have deserts here. Maybe if you find jinn, you'll find them either at the coast, because they enjoy hot weather. So either the coast or, interestingly, in Kisumu. Are you aware that some of the traditional, there were traditional and modern diviners and healers? The traditional ones would work with their spirits, their ancestors and the elementals. And then we have the modern ones who are based in Kisumu, who would also work with jinn from the coast, right? So the jinn from the coast are also associated with water. And I'm not talking about the negative jinn, because jinn is just a term for the spirits that are associated with healing, and also the spirits that are usually found in the Muslim mythologies. In fact, the demons that we see, the Solomon's demons that are seen in the Old Testament, are actually also jinn, right? Jinn. So we have to also understand where, or the basis of some of these belief systems. Another thing I wanted to mention about when you mentioned drownings. When I was researching the mermaids of Zimbabwe, there's a lot of abductions that tend to happen around water bodies. And before we started this, I mentioned there are people who are very spiritual or associate themselves with the water element, but they are so scared and afraid of water bodies. And these are usually people who understand that, especially if you have a high affinity with the water, when you go into the water, that's your home. You might not come back. You might not come back. So you'd rather avoid it for now, or approach it, from a certain distance until you feel comfortable enough join your people. Now, what they usually say when somebody is snatched, and even when, I'm sure for us in Luo land, like death by water is one of those taboos as well. There's so many things that have to be done to cleanse before the person can be buried. And usually when somebody is snatched, in Zimbabwe, they have many rivers, right? So people are usually snatched around sacred pools, snatched around rivers, children as well. And they usually say that when your person has been taken, and you hear news that, oh my goodness, either your child or your husband or your wife has drowned or have gone under, you're not supposed to mourn, apparently. You're not supposed to mourn the death or the disappearance. Not even, you don't even have to be happy. You can be, but don't mourn, because when you mourn is when that person will actually drown. They won't come back. Usually they are taken and they are returned. So there are certain, when you hear somebody has been taken under the water, there are certain rituals that they have to do at the rivers, and then the person will be returned to them unharmed.
And they do come.
Unharmed, yes. In fact, I was researching this thing for 2 months straight, and I need to go to Zimbabwe just to get primary sources on that. Southern Africa has such rich mythology and lore around water spirits. So they are returned unharmed, and usually when they are taken, some of them are taken to be trained as healers. Really? And in fact, it is said that those healers that have been trained by water spirits are the most powerful. Nobody can touch them. Nobody can touch them, because usually they come back. Some of them also come back with herbs. They come back with a certain knowledge, a higher knowledge of healing, right? So this is to your question about are mermaids or water spirits antagonistic naturally towards humans? And the answer would be no. And they are only antagonistic when you're encroaching. And usually, even somewhere like Zimbabwe, they have sacred pools. So where you have cases of mermaid sightings or there's a lot of water spirit activity, you can rest assured that water body from ancient times was deemed to be sacred and therefore was not meant to be encroached upon. So when you see somebody being snatched and not being returned, and sometimes I hear people can be away for extended periods of time before they come back, but others are returned immediately, others drown because the family mourned when they heard that the person has been taken. Right. So we always have to look at the water as an element that can help us, or if we are antagonistic, right? When you push the limits will push right back, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The water deities in Africa. Mamiwata.
Yeah, Mamiwata.
Maya, Oshun.
Oh yes.
What is their relevance in modern societies?
I believe for me, through my
First
introduction.
Of all, are you able to take me through these deities?
Sure. When we're talking about Oshun, I think my first experience with a direct, I would say, experience would be with being introduced or being given a message from Oshun herself, and I believe it was from there that I started really learning because I understood that. It's a closed system. You have to be initiated into it, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn. There's a reason that information came to me. There's a reason that gift came to me. Because even that gift that I was sent also represents a spiritual gift, if you look at it. When you could be dreaming, actually, the same thing could happen in a dream. You could be dreaming that you're near a water body, and either a person or you just find like gold, or you find like a precious metal, or somebody hands you a precious metal. That gift is not just literal, it is figurative. Usually it represents a spiritual gift that you've been given, and the fact that it is being given to you by somebody near a water body means that that gift is associated with the water. So for me, with Oshun, she's also associated with wealth. In fact, she's highly revered in the diaspora, in the US, West Africa, highly. And she has so many daughters. And she's associated with a lot of beauty, elegance, very Venusian. When we're discussing astrology, she's very much Venus. She's aesthetics, things that look good. She's associated with honey, with bees, the color yellow, golds. It's really all the good things. So it is believed that those who are daughters or associated with Oshun really tend to be abundant naturally. Right, so that's where the wealth element comes from, and not just Oshun. In fact, Oshun is like the first level, because when you get all the way to Olokun, because now Olokun is known as the owner of the oceans, so it means that Olokun, either as a he or a she, is the owner of all wealth. And now that we know that all wealth comes out of the water, you cannot be healthy without water. Amen, church? You cannot even be healthy without water.
And about Yemaya? This is from Ethiopia? Or?
No, Yemaya is also Yoruban. Same, Oshun is associated with rivers and lakes. So different kinds of water bodies, rivers and lakes. So sweet waters, or let's call it fresh waters. So fresh water goddess is Oshun. Now salty water, which is the ocean in this case, is Yemaya. Yeah, and she's usually associated with the color blue and white, which very interestingly are the same colors associated with the Madonna of the Sea, Mary, Mother of the Sea. In fact, if you Google Madonna of the Sea and you look at the colors, and then you Google Yemaya, you look at the colors, it's the same. So, which also tells us we are all dealing with the same entities or the same principles, just that we are giving them different names based on our cultures. So, and this brings us back to the point where somebody who's praying to Madonna of the Sea is in order, properly in order. And the person who's praying to Yemaya is properly in order as well. It's as long as we are honoring the element that is the ocean. So Yemaya as well is associated with the same things: healing, protection, health, wealth, right? But when you're dealing with the ocean, you're dealing with a very universal kind of wealth, a very universal kind of health. The ocean is also associated with climate, isn't it? Yes. So if you are, I know the rainmakers are associated with the sky gods as well, but because you're a rainmaker, rain is also water, isn't it? You need an affinity.
Do these people really make rain?
I don't think they make rain, more so than they call upon or they're able to align themselves with the elementals. And there are people who can do that, actually. In the Meru, oh my. Talk to the Meru. Very powerful. And usually rainmakers don't make rain in the way we think they do, where they just go in and do elaborate rituals. No, they simply walk into a town or a place and they bring rain. The rain comes with them. Right? And I believe that's the most natural way of creating rain. It is simply by being in that state where you're so naturally connected to the water element that whatever it is that your will is the same will as that of the deity. So that if I'm willing that there be rain here, then that is also the will of the water deities, and so it is. So for them, even in Zimbabwe as well, that's the same concept of rain making. There as well, yeah.
Mermaids?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Now, mermaids they are mythical creatures, and many people will say, well, so many people talk about mermaids, but nobody has ever seen one, or nobody has ever photographed one. Well, again, that's the nature of mythical creatures, right? A mythical creature is something that is, an encounter with them is highly personal. It's highly personal. You can only know them by the number of experiences you hear about them. And the thing with mermaids is they can be very positive or can be very antagonistic. Like we mentioned, if you're hanging around their sacred pools, they are going to be antagonistic, by the way. But if you're there in your capacity as a healer or in your capacity as a diviner, because you don't just approach sacred pools all willy-nilly. There's a way you have to go in there. I remember my own. You get snatched, by the way, and that's another thing. Reason why some diviners or some healers associated with the water, they avoid water bodies altogether because they'll get snatched. They'll get snatched, yes. Okay, you get snatched. Not in an antagonistic way. It's just that that's where you belong. That's where you came from. That's where your people came from. So it's like going back home. I don't know if you've read The Famished Road by Ben Okri, the West African, and he talks about the spirit children. There's a concept of the spirit child, the Obanje, who's born, dies, goes into the spirit realm, is born again, dies. So it's a whole cycle. But in that story, it's about a spirit child who refuses to go back to the spirit realm. So what happens is that every day, the story is just about him having encounters and seeing spirits. And I remember in literature, we were told that technique is called magical realism, where you're living real life, but you're seeing entities around you as if it's real life, it's actually happening. So there's that concept where you're so highly attuned to a certain element that you'll kind of be absorbed right back into, that's your home. You'll be called there, you'll be called back immediately. So I remember I was also nearly snatched myself in a sacred pool. No, I wasn't in Mombasa. Funny enough, it was a sacred pool around Meru. And if I wasn't with somebody, because it's the person who helped pull me out.
You were going in and you couldn't see.
I was just around. I was just on the outskirts of that pool. And one thing led to another. I was inside. But the good thing, it was just one leg, but I had to be pulled out. So you don't look at such an event negatively, of course. You have to look at it holistically. Like, what does this really mean? What is the bigger picture here? But that happened was that 2021? Yeah, I think it was 2021. But I understood that in a wider context of what was happening, because it was much later that I understood my affinity with the waters. Actually, I have a lot of affinity with the elements and the earth as well. And because of the work that I do, which is divination, and in some cases healing, of course, I would have an affinity with the water deities or the water element. So it's about simply making peace with this. Now, another thing I wanted to mention is that there are terrestrial waters and there are also celestial waters, isn't it? Because
terrestrial and celestial.
And celestial, yes. And you can look at it in two ways. There's a biblical perspective where God separated the waters, isn't it? The upper and the lower, the firmament. And then there's the astronomical one, where we have a section of the constellations of the sky where it is referred to as the sea, because it has essentially constellations that are associated with the ocean, like the dolphin, the crab, right? The fishes, Pisces, for instance, the whale, right? So we have to look at it as those of us who have an affinity with terrestrial water. You must also similarly explore the celestial connection or the celestial element or connection with the waters, which is why I know many people who are religious would say that, because you're not dealing with celestial or kind of higher level beings, then it's satanic. But what I usually tell them is actually no. What the water spirits that I'm dealing with actually also have a celestial equivalent. It's just that I'm dealing with the earthly element because that's the nearest and the closest one to me. But don't imagine that we do not have mummy water in the celestial spheres or in the celestial domain. And I know you've heard about the Indian Naga spirits, who are the snake spirit, the serpent. And that's another feature of water spirits. Mummy water is usually depicted as a woman with long hair. But they're long-haired. Actually, deities of the water are associated with long hair. They all have long hair for some reason. Even the old woman at the river who initiates in Southern Africa also has long hair. Now, when you look at, she's depicted as a woman, long hair, holding a serpent, a snake, right? And there's a reason for that, because the very oldest primal deity was a woman, number one, a goddess, the great mother. Let me call her that, the great mother, because we are all birthed, isn't it? Even I came out of a woman, out of a mother's womb. And then we have the snake. Usually the mother is represented by the snake, and you can see how the snake tends to be self-sufficient, especially the primal snake. So it's associated with death and regeneration. So both birth and death. So the cycle of life. Right? So we don't look at a serpent as a negative symbol. In fact, the serpent is one of the oldest.
That's how they do it.
Sorry?
That's how everybody looks at the serpent.
Yes, but it's because I would believe it's religious conditioning. Because what other information did they have? I mean, when we were growing up, we read the Bible. We didn't have access to any other information that would give us, a second perspective. We always had one perspective.
The serpent, the guy that went to Eve and told him,
yes,
have a taste.
Yes, and become like a god.
Conniving guy.
Was he conniving? Was he conniving
what is so positive about him?
Actually, we look at him as an awakener in this case. You can look at him as evil from Yahweh's perspective, because he kind of broke the rule that Yahweh said, don't eat this. But why did he say don't eat this while the tree is actually in the garden? It's because the serpent, therefore, acted as the awakener of Eve. And there's a reason why there's a reason why the serpent came to Eve and not Adam. Because you see, the woman and the snake tend to be, again, Mami Water and the serpent, they are usually associated as the same entity. They are usually seen together for the most part. They collude, yes, positively. Unless, by the way, if you look at, if you want to now categorize snakes as positive and negative, maybe when you look at the python is absolutely a positive entity, serpent entity. If you think of Omieri, who for us is represents or is a harbinger or a messenger of fertility.
And that's why I keep telling you that you see, Omieri is looked at as the reason why Nyakach is dry, for example. And
really? Why Nyakach is dry? Or, unless they mistreated Omieri, which is why...
mistreated Omieri.
Yes, which is why it is dry. Absolutely, I agree. Because, you see, Omieri is seen as a messenger of harvest, a messenger of abundance. So when you see that large python, it is telling you that, wow, there's something great that is coming to the community, and it is a messenger of the mother, of the great goddess, of the great mother. Now, when you mistreat the messenger, when you shoot the messenger, essentially, what are you saying? You're rejecting the message that it's bringing to you. So you're going to really come under some kind of consequence. So there's a negative consequence when Omieri is mistreated, and a very positive one when she is treated with respect. And the way we treat Omieri really tells us how we relate to nature. If you see a serpent minding its business and your first impulse is to harm, then how do you relate to other aspects of nature? I think that's where eco-spirituality came in. We also preserved some of these species, right? And I believe that they deserve to exist. Now, if you want to look at it symbolically, if you want to think of negative symbols of the snake, maybe look at the viper or the rattlesnake. Say, even if you have a dream and you see a viper or a rattlesnake, and you have a dream where you see a python, those are different messages. One is maybe a warning, the viper, because it attacks, isn't it? And the rattlesnake, venomous snakes essentially, are warnings. But a python, it's a constrictor. It won't attack you in terms of biting or anything. But it's of course it's terrifying, yes, of course. Meaning we have to confront what is it within us that makes us terrified of an animal that does not have arms or legs. Imagine if you didn't have arms or legs, you'd be vicious, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Because you have to protect yourself.
So then what is the role of water in healing and wealth?
Now, when you look at it as in terms of think of it as, think about your dreams first and foremost, because there are people who have a high affinity to water, others are more aligned towards earth. So I would look at this in terms of people who are attuned to the water, right? If you're attuned to the water, you kind of want to pay attention to what your dreams are telling you, because there are people who deny their ancestry, spiritual ancestry, because there are people who spiritually, if you look at the very first member of their clan or their lineage, and I'm talking 10,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago, it's somebody who must have been associated with the water, who came out of the water, and then developed from there. I mean, we all came out of the water anyway, isn't it? But if you look at your dreams and the kind of messages you receive, especially if you find yourself swimming, if you are in a boat, or if you're just sitting near a water body, or, what else? I would also say if you're simply drinking a cup of water. So if in case there's just any type of water associated or showing up in your dream, then it is kind of telling you or alluding or giving you, a signal that maybe you want to explore this. Now, when you talk about water, I would advise such a person that where do you stand with the Great Mother? Because a lot of us, our religion is paternal. Most of it is paternal, isn't it? Our Father in heaven, and we need paternal, heavenly or paternal deities. We need them, right? So we have the sky gods, but how are you at peace with the mother, the earth mothers, or the water mothers? Are you at peace? Because if you're not at peace, then your dreams will show you that as well. Right? So I would say walking in tandem with that, or walking in tandem with how you are being directed by your spirits, by your water spirits. A lot of you people are under the direction or guidance of water spirits without knowing it. Without knowing it. So just by acknowledging that, wow, I actually have allyship of the mothers, or I have allyship of the water spirits, then you're able to walk in your purpose. And you're not meant to struggle as much with health issues. You're not supposed to struggle as much with abundance. If you're struggling, then you are not at peace with the water element. And usually that is where you have to do certain things to create that equilibrium, so that now you're able to experience the abundance that comes with the waters. Because how can you be a daughter of Oshun and you're literally, you don't have a penny to your name? Whereas Oshun is associated with gold itself, isn't it? And another thing I wanted to mention is that there are also certain colors that are associated with the water, of course, blue and white usually. Yeah, blue and white. I'm going through a blue phase myself. Then look at me. But the good thing is I always pay homage. To these elements, and from there, also, you can consult where you feel like you're not at peace. What is the state of your life? And if you're being attacked by, or if you're drowning in water, then you're definitely not at peace at all. Yeah.
So as we come to the end of this first episode, which has been very illuminating, you talked about marine kingdom warfare.
Oh yeah, yes. It's some. In the last 2 years, there's been a clamor by the church, actually charismatic church, because I've not seen this coming out of the Catholic Church. I've not seen it, or even Pentecostal, or not even. I don't know. Yes, Jolemo. I don't know, but not even like that. Jolemo, but Pentecostal. Yeah. Where now there's active antagonization of water spirits, or of the water element, or active demonization of water spirits. What I would like to say is that, as with everything under the sun, and this is why the serpent told Eve that when you eat this apple, you will be like the gods. Why? Because you will have knowledge of good and evil. And a lot of people, there's a mystery there. And this is why I say I still read the Bible, because there are mysteries in there. So what is a mystery in that statement, that knowledge of good and evil makes you like godlike? It's because once you have knowledge that the world is dual, or knowledge of the opposites, the world is not just one thing. A lot of us walk around life thinking, life should be all good, or because I'm a good person, then only good things should happen to me. So that when something bad happens to you, there's a problem, right? Or something is wrong somewhere. The godlike knowledge of good and evil means that you accept both the good and the bad, and you're able to see both sides of a situation. So as a God, you're able to see the perspective of Yahweh, why Yahweh saw the act of Eve and Adam eating the apple as evil or as a sin. We can see that. But also you can see the other side, where these two people gained some kind of enlightenment. Of course, they took a big risk, but they gained some enlightenment. So the thing that the charismatic pastors are missing is that godlike knowledge, that every element has its positives. And every religion has its positives, or its angels and its demons, right? And I usually say another thing that I tell people is that within Judaism and Christianity, there are actually more demons than even in African spirituality. The rabbis say that at any one time you're working with 1,000 demons on your left, 10,000 demons on your right, which appears in Psalm 91, right? Though 1,000 may fall on one side and 10,000. Those are demons. So from my perspective, I can appreciate that, but I can also appreciate that on the other end spectrum, there's a balance, right? There you have the archangels and what have you, the ones who are applying the positive pressure to create equilibrium. So what the charismatic preachers are doing on this other side of the marine kingdom, they are majoring on the negative and then making it the universal, saying, the marine kingdom is demonic. Such a statement. That's what I call an easily falsifiable statement, because when you say the marine kingdom is evil, you're demonizing water. And the first thing we spoke about is how we are majority composed of water. A denial of the importance of water for us, physically and spiritually, is a denial of our own nature, of our own essence. So I can appreciate where they're coming from, but it's damaging because it means that and erases the positives. The healing side of water, the abundant side of water. And you can see what happened this year. This year, the water element made itself very, very, very known, right? Yes, but in a destructive way. Yes, the El Nino, the floods, the hurricanes. We even saw a hurricane, oh my goodness, for the first time. What was the name? Hidayah. Yeah.
And even the one in Dubai was.
Oh my, yes, that's the other
Dubai
thing.
Or Qatar?
The Gulf.
Dubai.
It was Dubai and Oman, somewhere else, another country in the Gulf also that was flooding. So the water element is that critical. And sometimes when we don't pay homage or when we don't honor nature like that, then nature will have to push back and tell you we exist. We exist. So at that point, usually when such a thing would happen, they would send shamans. Diplomacy, spiritual diplomacy. Right, that's where the shamans would have to now mediate with the water entities in the best way that they know possible, so that to bring back balance. But you see, because the charismatic preachers are saying, "Oh, the marine kingdom is evil," so who's going to step up and mediate? Then why don't you step forward and mediate in the middle of these floods? What would you say is the issue there? So I would really have noticed that. There's that clamor to demonize the marine kingdom. But I would say, yes, there are negative water entities, of course, destructive entities, and of which there are destructive entities when you look at all the elements. But never forget that with the destructive, there is also the opposite polarity, which is the constructive, which is the healing, which is abundance, which is knowledge of the future. By the way, prophecy is also attached to water, right? So, and I believe we'll talk about prophecy in the next episode.
Amazing. I'm flooded by all the information that I am getting. I'm going to be a spiritual leader.
Indeed.
In my next life.
Your birth chart supports it. It supports it because you're somebody who's very convincing, and you remember you're a diplomat.
Yes.
The Libra, you can bridge so many gaps, and this can be one of the things that you can help to bridge.
Yeah. So thank you very much, people of the internet. That was. I just would like to call this episode water.
Yeah.
Our bodies are made up of almost 60% water.
Right.
The skin, did you say is 90% or 64%?
64%.
One that is
the lungs is 83%. You said which one? 70. Lungs is 83%. Brain and heart is 73%.
Yeah.
Muscles and kidneys is 79%.
Yeah.
Even the bones is 31%.
Yeah. So people of the internet, please drink water.
Indeed.
And make peace with water. Right? I want to ask you to subscribe to this channel, because if you subscribe to this channel, it means that a lot of people would be able to see this channel, and the guests that I want to bring into this podcast will look at the numbers and feel good about coming. That is very, very important. Indeed. If you want to be notified about an upcoming episode, please, once you've subscribed, please hit that notification bell so that you'll be notified when an episode is out. The other thing is that you can always comment. The thing that we are talking about here involves a lot of things that are very controversial sometimes. And, you know, as somebody who grew up in church and talking about spirits and mean P and mean reg, you know, it's a very controversial thing. But I'm not a man who shies away from controversy, because I believe life should be controversial. You know, we talk about the things that you don't want, so that we jolt. You know,
we challenge ourselves.
Your reasoning. We challenge ourselves about these things. So. This Dialogues with Jagero is an open place where you can come and talk about Jesus. You can come and talk about Olokun.
Yes. Amen to that.
You know, Mildred has got services that she provides. She offers. She can read
tarot reading, traditional divination, which is ancestral, and birth chart reading, which is astrology.
Yeah. And we are going to leave our website in the description so that you can get in touch with her. Until another episode, bye for now.
Bye.